Norwich Confidential with your hosts, Dr. Ben Hong, Bonnie Hong, and Mr. Bob Farwell.
Well, good evening.
And
this is Norwich Confidential.
I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And welcome. We're continuing with our discussion of the November 3rd election. And we have this week...
We're one of the venues, I guess, for all the candidates to be able to express their opinions,
right.
And as far as letting everyone know why they're running.
And for you to actually get to know them so you can be an informed voter. We were hoping our third guest tonight would get in here quickly. But
tell them first who's here tonight.
Tonight
who's
we have the Republican Board of Education candidates that will be here. Margaret Bicott was scheduled to be here as well. However, she just had a recent death in the family and is not going to make it with us tonight. So we extend our condolences to Margaret. But we do have...
But we have Dennis Slopak.
And
you all know Dennis.
Well, and Angelo Yietz. So
yes. Why don't we start with having them introduce themselves?
Angelo.
I'm Angelo Yietz. I live in Norwich. I work for the City of Norwich Department of Public Works. Have for 31 years full-time. Probably 3 years prior to that during high school. I live in the same house probably for 45 years. I'm not a big change person when it comes to getting my roots in Norwich. My family's come from Norwich. My grandparents migrated to Norwich, so I've been here. I enjoy it here.
Why are you running for the Board of Ed?
Good question. I was on it for, I believe, 8 years. I got off. I said that's enough. There was a little positive thing going on. I think it was all-day kindergarten, so I wanted to leave on a positive note. I got on it. It was tough because we had to make cuts, and it was, wow, I didn't think it was going to be like this. Then somebody left during that term, and I thought if I got on, it would be an easier transition in the middle of a term because you have to learn how to do things. It's not just get on things. Things happen. It's a different, situation. Once you're on, you realize I can't bring this up until that. It's a whole process and where you fit in. I'm not a big educator. I don't have a big education background myself. I call my sister who was a principal. My brother-in-law was a superintendent. I'm a very good resource person, but myself, I work for a public works. So I said, where am I going to fit in? So I am good. Transportation, I know every street in Norwich. I probably couldn't name one that I didn't know. So I started getting on the transportation committee. Good judge of character. I was on some committees where we were hiring people. I'm a strong negotiator. I was a union person. Then I went into management, so I had a good outlook on that. I got into all the negotiations. And it was a good fit. And
I'll be back with more questions. And our second candidate for the Republican Board of Education is, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Dennis Slopak. I've been on the board now for 2 terms, and I was what you would call an accidental candidate. One of our board members who was running for re-election had to take a job that moved him away from Norwich. So 5 weeks before the election, we had a spot to fill, and I filled it. And when I got on the board, I decided that my talents would best be used negotiating contracts. I asked our chairman to put me on. I asked the other 2 members of the negotiation committee, Al Daniels, who is not here yet, and John Levanchi, if they had room for me, and they wanted me to come. So that's where I have contributed the most on the board. The first year, we negotiated 6 contracts with 6 different unions, and our negotiation with the teachers union went so well that the teachers actually took nothing that first year. And I have to congratulate them for that, because that's a big step. They were really pitching in to help out the city. And later on, I found out that that union had never taken a zero, ever, anywhere in the state of Connecticut before. So that was quite an accomplishment. I see things a little differently than most people. So when things come before us, I give a different point of view to the board. I wasn't sure I was going to run for a second term, but then just about every Democrat on the board asked me to run again. So I did, and now I'm doing it again this time.
Okay, thank you both. To start with, you just made a point about the teachers giving up, taking absolutely nothing in this last contract, which is,
Well, that
I
was
agree.
3 years ago, not the
But
last.
but that's still, that is substantial, and that's a pretty big sacrifice for, I think, any working person to say, yeah, we don't have to take anything,
Yeah. I gave them all the credit in
Right.
the world.
However, most of, as you both know, I'm sure you both have experience now with having been on the board, and an incumbent, so one of the things that really I think is worrisome is that 40% of the Board of Education budget is made up of grants. It is not paid with our tax dollars, and yet it still makes up the largest portion of our budget, our tax dollar budget. So that doesn't seem like that's very sustainable. How do you see approaching a budget that, I give all kinds of credit to the fact that the administration has been able to get that much money in grants to be able to support our school system, but all these bubbles do burst. So what are you looking at?
Dennis and I are both on a committee that's looking into the future to look at a long-term plan to maybe consolidate some schools that would, we could, maybe market some of those properties. We can't just keep going the way we're going because we're losing programs and stuff like that. And we're looking into maybe one of those answers is to build a bigger school and, get rid of some of the smaller schools. You can do it energy efficiently. You can do it with the ground maintenance isn't as much. You don't have to go from school to school to school. Norwich can benefit on it because of, some of those buildings are in business districts. So we're on an exploratory committee now to look at things like that, to look for the future, to save money, because we keep losing programs. It's not...
Yeah, but however, this year, I think the board has to be congratulated because we did get a language back. I would love to see it in the lower grades because that's where it really has the most impact.
Right.
I understand why it's starting in the upper grades, because you want to prepare the kids when they're going to NFA or on to high school. However, the biggest impact language has for children is in the very early years.
It
So,
is, and I've said it to everybody on the board, but there's only so much money that we got.
right.
And, you mentioned that 40% was grant-funded. I'd just like everyone to understand something. We're paying for 40% of the money of what we spend out of those grants. The Alliance Network, the Commissioners Network, all of these things, plus other grants from other sources. And where NFA is roughly, 30% of the budget.
Right.
And so that doesn't leave a whole lot for the taxpayers to have to bear. So if you look at it that way, NFA is actually the largest cost to the taxpayer, and yet they're unwilling to try to reach some kind of common ground with the board.
Were you involved with the negotiations? Did they have negotiations with NFA?
With NFA?
Yeah.
You know, this is very interesting. The last time the contract came up, 5 years ago, they wanted to negotiate with NFA. And NFA said, well, you didn't read your contract, you have to give 2 years' notice if you want to negotiate for the contract. So this time, we did it. We gave them 2 years' notice, but they kept putting things off and putting things off and not replying to emails, not replying to letters, not replying to requests, and so they just obfuscate, they delay, and then they said, well, let's get it in all the towns. I said we shouldn't take part, but we did, and then one guy, the superintendent from Lisbon, met informally with NFA, and he cut a deal, and it was binding on everybody. And I didn't want us to sign the contract, and the vote was 5-3 to sign the contract. I voted against it, and John Labangi voted against it, and Bob Aldi voted against it. If we could have switched one more, it might have gone the other way.
What would we have done then with our high school students?
We'd send them to NFA under the terms of the present contract.
Really?
Or
Well-
NFA could also say no. I
They-
voted for it for that reason. If we
And-
didn't have
and
a
they
plan, we didn't have a plan in place. We either built the high school immediately, which wasn't practical. It was an impossible deal.
Well,
It is. Or NFA would have to have some special deal where, they would take the kids, but it was to a point where you can't say no unless you're ready to build a high school. And NFA's a great school. I
Right.
mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
But wasn't NFA initially endowed to provide an education for the children of Norwich?
Yes.
So how could they say no?
well,
Yeah.
I don't
Well-
believe they could have, and I don't believe they would have, for the following reasons. We could have sent everyone that was there now, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, they could have completed their education at NFA if they desired to.
Right.
The only people they could have refused was our new incoming freshmen. But in point of fact, they needed the money too badly to have ever done that.
In
They would have
terms,
taken that.
yeah, in
Yeah.
terms of incremental raise of what the city of Norwich have to spend to give to NFA, what percentage is that? Do you have
Well,
an
it was
idea?
like 1.2 million or something?
Yeah,
Right.
they have told us right out front, it's going to be 2.5% each year
Every year?
for at
An
least
increase.
the next 2 years.
And is that until the next contract?
No, for the
negotiation?
next 2 years.
For the next
They've
year.
given us a 2.5%
Right,
raise this year.
Right.
They're probably going to do it for the next 2 years, and then we'll see what years 4 and 5 bring.
and in comparison, what about our public schools? How much are they getting in terms of incremental raise?
Not much at all.
Well, I think in our public school, we have that 40% of the funding comes from a grant,
Grants.
like you said.
Right.
So there might be some give and
That's-
take from that.
Those are
from those
from what I understand, programs that have been cut, or that's one way we got the education back into the curriculum for students. Isn't that the way it was paid for, was because we were able to get the grants to pay for it?
What are you specifically saying?
Language, I mean, it's not like because he's talking about the 40%. Is that where the raises or the increments come
Well,
from? But it
the grants are
doesn't.
kind of funny. Each grant is for a
Very
specific
specific,
purpose.
right.
And we can't spend that money on anything except that
Correct.
purpose.
Yes.
Now, I was just informed 2 days ago that we just got another grant for $1 million. But that can only be used to improve the buildings. So none of that money is going to go directly toward teaching the children, and indirectly it might increase student achievement, but not directly.
Right.
Right. So you know where we're going with this discussion. Eventually, we're going to what the taxpayers had been saying, on why is it that my tax to the city keeps on going up and going up?
Well, that's
And-
not what I'm concerned about, but you can answer his
Well,
money
I'll
question
answer-
first.
I'll answer that. When you think about it, Ben, we have the grants for 40%, NFA takes up 30%, that's
Right.
70%. So the taxpayer's only paying 30% of what we spend, or roughly $23-24 million. The city government spends, what, 50? A little over 50?
But what's not going up? Your electricity's going up, your salaries are going up, everything's going up. I mean, cost of books, cost of everything's going up, cost of living's going up, you have to give, raises out. We ride a hard line, but I mean, everything's going up.
And it
just
has to
to-
be paid
yeah,
for
I mean-
with something.
Well,
You have to
well,
pay for it.
Well, my point is that everybody thinks the education budget is costing them so much money. But in point of fact, the city side of the budget is almost twice what the public school budget, grades pre-K, through 8,
Right. However,
plus the city.
the education budget does include NFA.
Right, it does.
So you have to, I mean, we
But it shouldn't.
educate all of our children right through the 12th grade,
Right,
so.
but it shouldn't really be included in the education budget. It should be included on the city side of the budget, because the Board of Education has absolutely no control over what NFA spends or how it spends it. If they want to put up beautiful fountains, we have no say about it.
Right.
If they want to put up a beautiful wrought iron gate around the place, we have no say
Right.
about it. And in point of fact, when you ask the effect of some of these raises that NFA gets, 4 years in a row, before I got there, the Board of Education was held to 0. And then, one year, the only raise we got was to cover the increase in the NFA tuition. So basically, the public school side of Norwich, grades through 8, have had almost nothing.
Right, and I
For
think that
7
we've seen,
years.
right, and I think we've seen the effect of that, because certainly the reputation of the education of our grammar schools has gone down. You have, I mean, I would be,
It is basically the quality of
That's-
the education.
that's
and
what my,
obviously it's
right, much more than the
held by
money.
the
God, I feel terrible about hogging the microphone, but I'll do
Angelo, if you don't know
Angelo, you
Angelo
can-
well enough, you'll know he's going to jump
Well,
in.
he'll get a sharp
Yes.
one in every
We're-
once in a
we're-
while.
we're-
Well, don't you
doing
think
well
that a lot of that has to do with how Norwich has changed? Norwich has changed
Indeed.
jobs, we're a casino city. You
Indeed.
don't have that same,
But primarily, you're a board of, you're a member of the board that basically oversee the education of the children of Norwich.
Okay, let me address that. A lot of people look at test scores, the state test scores, and say, oh, Norwich is doing poorly. Well, Norwich has like 34 different languages being spoken in the school system. Now, let me tell you something about the unfairness of those test scores. And that is that suppose somebody moves to Norwich and they're speaking a language other than English, and they move in January, but the tests are given in February. They have to take those tests. Guess what? They don't know what they're doing. They can't even read the tests. They're just marking papers. So it looks like we're doing terrible when in fact the quality of the education that we're providing is really exceptionally good. These teachers are so good, the administrators are so good, and these kids are thirsty to learn.
Right. I think. that
Well, we
just
can
have-
vouch for the
Just-
fact that the administration
I'm
was
not
very
going to be
good.
like
And
Angelo and be
and
quiet.
we did go to those
But-
programs that they
Because there's
have.
more than just the programs that we actually went to view. I know how, like for science, there's a whole program where they actually go to Hartford, they compete, Rotary
so
sponsors
exciting.
that. Right.
It's very exciting. We have
Right.
these kids in front of us that build robots. I mean, here in school, the gals, I wanted to invest money in these kids because They
some
have
of
this,
their
they have this
inventions.
program, but no,
Yeah.
they have a program, a stock market program, where they
Yeah.
take fake money and they do it, and they were second in,
No, they came in
or they came in
first.
first.
In the
And they'd
whole
explain
state.
how they invested, how much money they made. I
Really?
really,
Yeah,
my
and these
investors, believe me, not that I have
Fifth
much money, but
graders.
they're not as good as these kids
Fifth
were.
grade students.
Yeah.
And
And
what
they-
an excellent program, and they have
They
all
did
these
well.
reading,
Yeah.
exciting
Well,
programs
we
going
can,
on.
like I said, we can vouch for that, that there is a quality that we can see, and what actually this is a tangible quality that we can feel coming from the teachers to the students.
Yeah.
And you're right, you know, test scores should not be the final determinant of the quality of your educational system, because that really
However-
can give you a lot of, you know, wrong picture.
However, there's also the ability to look at what classes are offered to our kids. And I think that's kind of where I see. That's why I was so happy about language, again, finally coming back to our grammar school. I think you've actually brought in music also now again. I'm not sure about art, but a lot of all of these, that right side, or maybe it's the left side of the brain, but all of those kinds of activities are just as critical.
We
for
agree.
learning.
That's one of the reasons why Dennis and I, you know, are looking into, how can we do this? You know, maybe it is building a bigger school and that person can go floor to floor to floor. They might not have a full day of it, but they can get introduced once a week, because a person could be on this floor or that floor. You know, there's very positive things. It's not for a negative reason why we looked at this. It's to get programs when we only get this much of the pie, and we need this much. How can we make this much work and be beneficial to us and help out?
Well, how many
Well-
schools are there
Programs.
currently?
8?
Well, I think we have 11 altogether.
11 elementary schools?
Well, there's the preschool and the kindergartens, and then there's the grammar schools. I think he's right with 8 there. And then we have the adult education, too. So right now, we're running like 11 plants. So it only makes sense to consolidate, and these are old plants. Our youngest school building is 45 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one is that?
Oh, my God, I forgot, I'm sorry.
Well,
Teachers?
before we
I'm
go
not
into the
sure.
infrastructure, let's continue on what we're talking about, and that's quality of education and the system that you're giving to the children. Because one of the concerns that I have also is how you can sustain these programs. And as you probably know, if you were young once and kid once, you go to school, you take French in class, and then the next year it's gone. I mean, there's no, and then so you take Spanish, and then it's gone. So what I'm trying to say is that there must be somebody there who takes the effort of making sure that, we're not putting in a program just because it is a program and we don't know what's going to happen next year.
There's a lot of hoping and praying going on
Yes,
with
and
this
that is
thing.
my concern.
And it's my
Being a
concern,
board
too.
member, you probably
And
will have to think twice about
One reason, when the budget came up for a vote, I said, I had said it earlier in the year, and then I said it right then, the night we had to vote on the budget, and I said, I'm not going to vote for any budget that doesn't put music and world language back into the budget. And then they said, well, we are getting a grant, and we will be able to do this and that. And so I was able to say, okay, I'll vote for the budget.
But I think that Ben's point also ties in with why language was started in the upper grades, because just for continuity. Because if they do take whatever language it is, it would be continued.
Actually, coming here, I was asking Bonnie, what language are we talking about? Is that English? That you're putting up this program? Well,
Actually,
it's
it's
funny, but-
Spanish.
It's Spanish. Well, you have a lot of Spanish-speaking students, I guess. They'll be teaching your other kids.
And that works too.
And that works
right.
too. I mean,
But how can you do it if you don't know what you're doing next year? You got to hope that it's
Of
going to
course.
happen next
Of
year.
course.
Because if you
Yes.
said, boy, we're not going to probably get this, then how do you ever get something started? You just got to hope and hope that something happens.
And
where
we're
you can
counting on
continue
you.
that.
We're counting on you because you are there actually who's going to be doing the hard thinking.
And we already know what the effect of grant going away is. Before I got on the board, since, we elect 9 people, and I was the 9th candidate, there was no question that I was going to serve on the board. So I got the budget, printed it off the internet, and the document said that the teacher salaries was just under $12 million, and in the next year, it was going to be just under $18 million. I was mad as hell. I called up the superintendent. I said, look, I want to come in and talk to you. I introduced myself and said, I want to find out why this is happening. I said, nobody gets a 50% raise. And you know what it was? They were funding, that was $5 million, almost $6 million, on grants. The grants went away after 5 years. And there we were with a $5 million gap. And we had to do it. And, not that I could do much then because I was just there. There's a learning curve, there truly is.
Right.
And every time it comes up, I'm quick to point out that, if we're going to do this, it might not be here someday. And there's nothing we can do as long as the city refuses to give us that funding. I mean, some of the things that that are funded, some of the staff that we fund are for after-school programs. And that's for the kids that have the least advantage. But when we have children that are better off, they're getting a short end of the stick, really.
And we see that with state mandates
Yeah.
that were funded through grants that are still have to do, but there's no more funding, so guess who has to do it now?
I think the mandates are one of our biggest problems. It always has been. I mean, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you'd have all of these state mandated programs and not one penny of funding to go along with them.
Right.
They'd stop funding and then they'd take
Or
funding
they'd-
away and still
or-
do it. Special
Or
education has a lot of that
they'd
happen.
pass the mandate, but the funding isn't coming down the pike for maybe, I don't know what the arguments are, but you're not getting the funding to go along with those mandates.
Well, if you remember back in, I think it was 1984, when the legislature passed the Teacher Enhancement Act, and suddenly the salaries at the low end of the scale doubled.
Yeah.
And they paid for 3 years of it, and after that, it was gone. So the towns are hit with that big bill, in 1987 or 88 or whatever it was. And literally, the unions got the legislature to do what they couldn't do for themselves, and that is negotiate a better deal.
Well, you can't have teachers that are so underpaid.
Oh, no,
I
you
mean,
can't.
Yeah,
But-
and so it was the right thing to at least begin to get those salaries up to the point where they're not begging for money. However, I understand the point, because once those grants do go away, and you don't have a community that understands that currently they're only paying 30% of, what is it, 120 million?
Well, the school budget's 71, 72 million, the Board of Ed budget.
The Board of Ed budget.
And then the
70
city side is a little over 50, so they're paying out, the whole town is spending 120 million. But,
So we've got, when you look at the fact that it is a community that is struggling to make sure we are able to provide the services that we know are necessary. You cannot, you can't hurt education anymore at this point in this community. It's, every time you do, it's a detriment to economic development.
Well, also, you have to separate also education as well as social service work. Now, I understand that the pre-K is a very important program, I guess, as including the after-school program, because there will always be an issue about, if I were a single parent, I have to go to work at,
Excuse me. Take it off.
say, 7 o'clock in the morning. And the question is, well, how can I go to work if I have to
What is going?
3-year-old, 4-year-old? And it becomes something that they are looking forward to, that, well, does our school system have a pre-K program? So that becomes a question, is that really education, or is that that program education? Is that program social work? And the same thing as the after-school program. And do you separate that and say, well, this is education, but this is really social work?
It's about feeding kids too, you know, how many
Exact-
kids that
and-
come
and
that
feeding,
don't even eat.
and that is true, and that is
We
correct.
have programs that feed
Right,
kids.
and true.
In the amount of children that go to these, what's the number of kids that need assistance with lunch?
75 to 80%,
Yes.
and so it's there for everyone.
And a lot of kids
Right.
go home to a bigger, older brother or sister. I mean, that's, you know, so
Mhm.
any programs that we can get, these after-school programs, the pre-K programs, they're so important.
Now, I assume that these are all grant money that's going into this?
The
is that
pre-K
right?
programs that we
Right,
have?
yes.
Yeah,
And the after-school
After-school
program and so on?
programs.
yeah.
Yeah. These are programs that are more funded through grant. I assume that
Yeah.
grant money is easier to, to get into these programs than
And-
having a friends.
And you know,
program.
those little ones, they've showed us a slideshow and videos of what goes on over there at the Bishop School with the pre-Ks. Those kids are adorable, and they're wonderful, and they just are so happy to be there.
Yes.
And it's great for them, because it's truly a learning experience as well as a socialization one. So when you ask, is it education or is it social service? Well, it's a little of both.
And I do
I think
agree
it's-
with it. It's a delight to see those
Yeah.
children coming
But it
in.
is a foundation for education.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you, I think you were talking about Xander for a minute,
Right.
where you have a second grader that actually, because of all of that, starting very early, they learn to read so quickly. It's not Dick and Jane, see Dick run. No, it's a full book.
Now they have their
And they-
option of what book too,
That's
Bonnie. It's
right.
not just, you have to read that, like we have
Right,
to read.
right.
Now you pick a book that interests you, as
Right.
long as you can, read a little bit, and then we get these slideshows and these, probably not slideshows,
Yes.
is an old word, but overhead project, whatever they are.
Right.
And it shows how these kids really have an interest, how they're comprehending at such an early age of what they're reading through these new programs. And because they have options, they don't have to just read this book. They can read about firemen if they want. They can read about ball playing, being a nurse or a doctor.
Harry Potter.
Harry-
Third graders that are reading Harry Potter. I mean, that's amazing to me. Or a second grader that will write the book, and you have an author's event at the school where the parents all come in and the kid reads his book, illustrated.
And that's nuts, with an energetic staff that really gets into these programs. They work with these kids. They
And very
give extra
motivated
hours.
teachers.
We have a curriculum director in the person of Joe Stefan, who is absolutely fantastic. And writing is one of the areas that they're concentrating on. And these kids write a story. They brought in a young Haitian girl to us who 4 years prior knew no English. She had been in the earthquakes in Haiti. Her family was really disrupted. They came to the United States. She spent a year or two in North Carolina, and then they came up here. She wrote such a fantastic story about what she had been through and how she appreciates being here. It was eloquent and succinct and just plain phenomenal. We all had tears in our eyes and got up and applauded this young
Yeah.
woman.
Our meetings are interesting to go to. If you can go to the first part of our meeting, there's usually an interesting thing where they're awarding somebody, and Abby, our superintendent, usually, bringing up teachers that have done this and that. She's a good cheerleader for the Board of Ed. And when you can't give big raises, it's good to have that cheerleader in place that really, tells everybody what a good job they're doing, but it's always like a fun part of the Board of Ed. Then it gets into the
business.
The
business part of
business
it,
part of
you
it,
know,
and
the
then
loan
everyone's going to be
stuff,
pulling
programs,
their
it's-
hairs and
You'll see me
carrying.
nodding a little
Yeah.
bit, but that first part, when
Right.
you have these kids that are learning different things, like I
Right.
said, all these
It
different
is.
programs, it's worth
Yes.
Like-
watching it on TV or coming to one just for that part, and then
Yeah.
sneak off on it.
Right.
Rotary does the CAP Awards every year
Yeah.
for the school. And that is also amazing, because we get to meet both the teacher and the students during that. And then I know the board also has another award.
Well,
That's similar.
they have the presentation in the school. I think it's the first meeting in December.
Yeah.
The meeting in
The
December.
superintendent award?
Yeah. And when I first got on the board, John Levangie says, "You gotta be at this one." He says, "This is the best meeting of the year."
It's, yeah.
And you know what? He's right. He was right.
It is. And actually Rotary almost feels the same way when we do that award every year
Starts
as
with the
well.
principal talk, and then the teacher
just-
talks, and you can just see the pride and stuff like that,
Yes.
In all,
makes you
from all
feel-
the schools, yes. It really is
So
impressive.
let's move on, and let's talk about Angelo's favorite topic, and that has something to do with infrastructure. You mentioned there's about 8 schools that, public school. How many kids now walk from their home to school?
Wow.
Every single one of them shouldn't have to do it. I don't care if they live just down the block.
Really?
Really.
You don't want children to,
To walk to school?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
why?
Because this city is filled with sex offenders. And I don't think we should be serving kids up on like pastries on a smorgasbord for these people.
We really have that big of a problem?
Part of what we do is to provide a secure environment for the kids. And if their parents want to let them walk home from school and walk to school, that's fine. But I'll tell you this, my granddaughter, when she went to Aquanic School, never walked one day. They got to take the bus when she was in kindergarten, but once you're in first grade, you're 5 or 6 year old, you have to walk to school? Not a chance.
Okay.
So I
I'm
think
a
that
little more
opens up.
comfortable with it. I
Right,
think
that-
there's buddy systems, there's
Yeah,
that one.
there's that, yeah.
That opens
adult
a
thing.
big discussion, primarily that's heading towards what you're saying, that if we can consolidate all the schools and build one,
Everybody
say,
would get a
campus,
ride.
because
Everybody
nobody
would get a
now
ride.
anyways walk to school, everyone has to take a school bus anyways. So it doesn't matter whether it's just going to this corner or going to a main
It's-
campus.
Still quite
these
a
are,
few kids,
these are
yeah.
different times. When I was a kid, I walked to school, it was a couple of miles, and I walked through the woods, and then when we
Yeah.
moved, I walked through the cow
Yeah.
pastures.
Yeah,
You know,
Is my father talking? Did you mow any lawns on the way?
no, I didn't mow lawns, but I did go uphill both ways. Whether it was
During
snowing
winter
or not,
storm.
right?
Yeah,
No, but the
Well, that
walk
is
was,
true.
the walk
That-
wasn't all that short. I mean, they were at least a mile. I mean, I would walk from Overlook with my mother first, going to Pearl Street School, and then alone going over to Falls School, which is no longer even there. That one was torn down. But that was my favorite school. Falls was my favorite school. And then walking to Buckingham.
What I'm
so-
trying to also point out, and going back to your idea, Angelo, and that is, we are also looking at, like modern times now, the security of the children while in school.
Security,
Because,
science programs, different programs that you can do in a newer school. But mainly, you're looking at a budget and people that keep saying that we can't afford to keep going up. So part of that's looking at the future and saying,
now Dennis mentioned about the security outside of the school, and that is the city of Norwich, and I hate to think about that, but inside the school, I'm sure that there are concerns of parents that there might be something also that's going on with all the things, horrible things that we're hearing.
Good security precautions before Sandy Hook.
Yes.
And after Sandy Hook, they were really redoubled. I mean, there's
Because of grants.
cameras.
They were
and-
home
and-
line
And now you
grant
have to
security.
ring in, and You can't go, you have to identify yourself and state your business before they even buzz you in to get in the door.
Right.
Secured doors that you can't just get into.
Right. Well, because of the infrastructure that we have right now, do we have capability of putting in a secure school building
All of them
as
are.
we can?
All
Yeah,
of them
we-
are. Every one of them
Thank
have.
goodness, yeah.
Every-
We put new doors in, we
Yeah.
put buzzer systems, cameras in each one. We just went to a newer phone system in all these that were all paid through these grants.
Yeah.
We still have a police officer in our 7th and 8th grade that we feel is very important, not just for safety, but just for communications, to find out, get that comfort level. Maybe something's going on with a child somewhere, and they feel that they never tell before, but with that police officer, talking to them, getting to know them, it's a comfort that it's not us against them, because sometimes kids are brought up that way, where,
Right.
Police aren't the good people, they're the bad people, so having them in that school isn't just for security, it's also for...
They're also,
comfort
they're
level.
also very good as a resource for any mentors that are going in to work with any children that need to have a one-on-one relationship with, in
So
a
you,
mentor
yeah,
role.
you would feel more comfortable having everything in one campus and be
Or a
able
couple
not only
campuses,
do
maybe.
that, but
Maybe a
also
couple
save.
campuses. We just hired a company to look at the structures that we have, look at what the biggest bang for the buck is going to be, where we should really think about consolidating, what buildings could be added on to, or should we do a new building, find land. It's just the very beginning stage of this, but we just hired a
As
consultant
Dennis
to-
mentioned, your newest school is 45 years old. And with the kind of building, I'm not sure if it will pass inspection for habitation
Well,
right now.
that's part of what the study's going to do. They, when they did the next document, that was before I came along, they had done this then, so 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And, geez, I'm on the Building and Space Committee, and I first started seeing it, and I started saying, oh my. And then I got out the calculator, and I started adding it up, and we're looking at, several hundreds of millions of dollars just to bring the things up to,
Code.
yeah.
To
And then you know
standard.
what we have? We have a 70-year-old building that still can't really support the needs of the kids. Now, there's another thing going on. I kind of volunteered to be the board liaison to a study that was done, and the work has just come out. It was called cultural competency. But when I got there, it was more like counting heads. There's so many Latinos, there's so many African Americans, there's so many Asians, and that's not cultural competency. It's maybe awareness of the diversity, but none of it explained any particular cultural characteristics of these different ethnic groups. And I kind of got the opinion early on that this young woman who's a PhD from the University of Connecticut was trying to make a case that basically the black kids aren't being treated fairly. And when we saw the test scores come out, the test scores that had the higher percentage of white kids and the higher percentage of Asian kids, those schools did the best. And it's not like we're only sending our good teachers to those schools. I'm telling you, they have great teachers in the schools that have done the worst. But the tests, like I said, they're unfair because they're testing students that don't even speak the language yet.
Well, we also, it's not just that they just move into the community. We have a lot of, I know that it's called transient, even though it's actually in the same community.
Right, they're moving
But
from-
they'll move from one district to another,
And then they have new teachers.
and right. So and what I found out was, I think the number was almost 500 students last year that happened. And that's a pretty big percentage.
I think it was larger.
It was larger than
Yeah, I
that?
think it was.
But
You know,
that's a-
we have like 3,200, 3,300, 3,400 students in our, lower grades, not including NFA.
Right,
And I think maybe 30% of them changed.
yeah.
It's exciting, though. That's
Between
probably a
the two.
person that lives in an apartment that's worked here, saved some money, and now all of a
Right.
sudden they're buying a house in Norwich. So
Right.
maybe they're moving.
Or they find
that.
find a larger apartment or a better apartment, and they're moving to another area.
But that's-
it happens to a lot of people within the city.
That's one of the
It does.
benefits of consolidating the schools and having everybody under one roof.
They'd have the same teacher,
they'd
they
have-
would have
they'd have same
they would
teachers,
have the
the same-
consistency.
The consistency, whether they moved across town or not. And
When you consider
not to,
30%.
not also to consider the economies of scale that can be realized when you only have to operate 1 or 2 or 3 physical plants versus 11.
Of course.
And-
And of course, the staffing to do those maintenance also
Yeah.
will obviously have to be less than what you are
Well,
doing now.
not
One of those
necessarily.
studies were pretty
but-
interesting in that Norwich, it's looking to increase student population over the next couple
Oh,
of
yes.
years, where all these other towns
Yes.
in this area are all going down. Norwich
Yeah.
is,
We're the only town in
That's
eastern
right.
Connecticut that's expected to either maintain the student population or for it to slightly increase.
Yeah, because
Or
all you
it's
need
the
to do is
negative.
really go to the grocery stores like Stop and Shop or ShopRite, and you'll know what the population of Norwich is going
Yeah.
to be. You see a lot of young couples, you see a lot of immigrants coming in, and, it's the future of Norwich, and we have to maintain a standard of educating these children.
And there are some people that really believe, and the city is really at a liability for this, that are going to say someday, well, you're not funding the budget because there's too many kids that don't look like you.
Say
I
that
don't-
again?
I don't
Say
feel
that again?
I don't feel it either, but other people do, and eventually,
You mean there's so much prejudice in the community that they don't want to fund the budget because the kids don't look
well,
like them?
I'm not saying that,
But is
but
that
I'm
what
saying,
you're-
I'm saying there are people that feel that way.
That feel that way?
Yeah.
Well, I hope there's more intelligent people that don't even consider that. I consider a child, so...
Yeah, but
and we do
if
too.
Yeah, I know.
But
I think
if-
that it's...
that comes to the point of boiling over, where they're going to say, okay, bring suit against the city, that's going to be a hell of an expense.
I hear more of seniors saying that, well,
I don't
why
have
should
kids
I be
in the system.
funding the school system when I don't even have a child going to school, or never did, or something like that?
I'll tell you why.
It
And,
impacts
and, and you know the answer
Yes.
to it. Because education is the foundation that this society is built on. And the more people that get educated, the better society we'll have, the more innovation we'll have. Can you imagine if Steve Jobs never got educated? He came from a broken home, and what if he just went in the corner and played tiddlywinks or something? What would the world look like without personal computers? If Bill Gates
or
and Steve
Barack
Jobs.
Obama never get educated, and we probably
Right.
won't have him as president. That might be good. Well, in any case,
A little,
yes,
a little
there's been...
education is a dangerous.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, obviously, when it comes to personal choices, there's a lot of people who will tell you why they think that it's going to be this or why we don't want to support that. But education actually touches everybody's
Right.
heart and minds, and the people who may not even be involved in that, they still have to come up with their tax money
You
to
know
do
what?
that.
The people whose houses don't burn down still have to pay for the fire department, too.
And when we have
And
referendums
insurance.
to
Right.
improve things and do things, Norwich voters have come out and been very positive over my
Right.
years I've lived in this town. Very seldom, I don't remember
Yes.
any education
Well,
bonding get
I heard a
voted
rumor.
down.
Let me ask you about the rumor that I heard, that there are members that are running for council that actually want to put the budget up for referendum.
That scares me as a city employee, it scares
Yes.
me as a Board of Ed member.
Yes.
As a Board of Ed member, I would be asking that question.
As a Board of Ed member, you know what happens whenever there's a threat, you have to give layoff notices. Even though you might get that money, even from the state, we have to
Right.
let those employees
Yeah.
know. I know how I am, you know how you
Right.
are, what type of aggressive people that we are.
Right.
If I got that and I'm a young, fresh teacher, I'm gonna go
I'm
out and
gonna
I'm gonna
look.
apply somewhere else, so now all of a sudden, I'm kind of, maybe that other teacher, well, I think everything will be good. You're losing some of those great teachers
right.
because they're the young, aggressive teachers, and they're like, boy, I want to teach, I don't want to ever stop teaching, I'm the junior person.
Right.
You're gonna go out and do that, and it's scary because you lose people, and that's what's tough about, Norwich
Well,
needs
Angelo is exactly
a
right.
young teacher.
This year, before those kind of notices ever went out, it was clear that the budget cuts that would have to be made meant would be losing at least 6 certified teachers. I have a young fellow who taught at Uncas, was great with the kids. I saw him, in the class, and he was just fantastic. He said, you know what? I'm not thrilled with the urban environment. Could get laid off anyhow. He just tendered his resignation and he got a job in Salem.
Yeah. Part of the, and I think what
And
you see.
6 of them did that.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
one
of
of them
course.
was a retired.
And there's no golden handshake with a teacher because their
I know.
pensions.
I
Yes.
know. And I think that the other thing that concerned me is that when you look at, this is a city. Norwich is a city. It is not a town. We are a city. I don't know any city of substantial population that would ever even consider that, to put a budget out. Could you imagine Hartford deciding, okay, well, let's let the citizens of Hartford decide whether or not we should pass this budget? I mean, that would be nuts. You have small towns that go through 11 referendums before they ever get one passed. So I hope this is just a rumor.
Well,
And who comes to vote first? It's not the person
No.
who really cares about it. I'm on my way to work. I vote everybody. I'm
Right.
different, but the average person.
Right. They're
Until
gonna-
Average
they're like,
person
boy,
will vote for a no.
Because they don't want their money spent.
It's the
I've got,
negative person.
Of
that's-
course.
that's going
not
out
to
to vote.
consider the fact that each referendum costs thousands and
35,000.
thousands of dollars.
In Norwich, it's $35,000.
Right.
So,
So imagine going to 10 referendums.
10
You're looking at
referendums.
$350,000 down the drain.
right, right.
So we only
So-
have a few more minutes, and I will let the two of them each talk about something. But before I do that, Angelo and Dennis, you mentioned about the dream of having one main campus for the public school system in Norwich. Is that just a dream, or are you just
No, they're
going
studying.
to-
Well, it's the
Create.
dream that I had. and,
Well, there's,
that's what
different-
I'm still pushing for, but it might not wind up that way.
Okay.
All right.
Would you both like to go ahead, take a minute?
summarize
Just
who
summarize.
you are and what you want to do?
I would state your name again so that voters, people that watch this, they'll watch it more often on Facebook and YouTube. So,
Yeah, I'm Angelo Yietz. I'm running for the Board of Education. I really didn't anticipate on running again. It wasn't, I only have a couple more years before I retire from my job, and I said I wouldn't do it, and then I got a little excited over where you fit in, what's going on, and I wanted to see, first I was on my other term, I wanted to see the Kelly thing go through, because I was part of that, doing the reconstruction as new. Now we're looking at consolidations. I feel like, I'm a good person, I'm a realist, I'm this, I'd like to see, is this gonna take us to the future? Is it gonna help us sustain programs and maybe get more programs in, because you can go to floor to floor? That's why I'm running.
it was a pleasure to have you with us, Angelo. Thank you. Dennis?
Okay. Again, I'm Dennis Slopak. I've been on the board for 2 terms. I'm running again because we have started this idea of school consolidation and improvement, and I want to see that through. I've enjoyed the 2 terms I've had. I've been fairly vocal on the board, although it's to the dismay of some at times. But we're truly colleagues on the board. There's no Democrat way or Republican way to educate children. We all see that the children have to come first, and their success is what's important, because we've had our turns, and we want to make sure they get theirs.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
I
you,
want to
Angelo.
thank both of you for being here and for letting us make sure that the public becomes an educated voter. I think it's pretty easy to see that both of you have been serving the city very, very well, so we thank you for being here and for sharing that with us.
And with that said?
With that said, next week we will be interviewing the two gentlemen that are running for city treasurer. So tune in to find out what the treasurer does and a little bit more about some of our referendum questions. Thank you for joining us this evening.
And good night.
This is Norwich Confidential. Good night.